Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rugby Through the League's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the other week when we had James Kent on, obviously talking about all things Luxembourg. We've now also welcomed another great guest this week. For those that are aware, Mike Friday will not be pulling any punches today. We will be putting World Rugby and everything to bed. Every issue in the world will probably be resolved today on this podcast. So, Mike, I really appreciate your time, mate, and thank you for joining us. And yeah, let's try and put World Rugby to rights, shall we?
It could take a while. all solvable, but there we go.
100%. So for those that aren't aware who you are and what you do, can we just have a quick roundup of your rugby life so far? Because you've had a fair journey so far, haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, I was a former player. I was part of the lot that became amateur to became pro back in the late 90s or mid 90s. So I'm that old. Yeah. I was London Wasps and Harlequins and Blackheath as well as a player. Nice. And then chart surveyor by trade. That was my proper job back in the day. But obviously have coached a lot of 15s and 7s. So coached in the world of 15s at London Welsh, London Scottish, helped out Wasps, as well as USA 15s. And have done pathway stuff as well. For England, obviously, I was part of the Junior National Academy coaching crew back in the day when it first started, with the likes of a very young Danny Kerr, Ben Foden, Ben Youngs, an array, Matthew Tate, all of those kind of golden generation boys that came through in the early thousands. But obviously known more as a person on the Sevens circuit, which is about, developing young stars to potentially go on to 15s back in the early days. I was an England Sevens player captain, 98 Commonwealth Games, as well as the 2001 Rugby Sevens World Cup, and then went on, became a coach for England Sevens. Also coached Kenya Sevens, back from relegation to top 4 team, and then most recently, the last kind of 10 years up until the Paris Olympics, I coached USA from relegation to nearly winning the World Series one year in 2019 and 3 Olympics. But ultimately, kind of all of that Seven stuff is about holistically developing young players to become the best version of themselves on the pitch and off the pitch, which is a big part for me. Also, the underdog always kind of suited me. Even back in the England days when we were underdogs, we weren't taking 7 seriously, and we ended up turning that into a development player machine. So it's been an interesting life. I've seen a lot of countries interacted with a lot of different cultures. Just recently last summer I was in the RPL, the inaugural RPL in India, which again was another experience. Sri Lanka back in the day. So wow. It's been a great career. Hopefully there's a few more chapters in it, but we'll see.
Yeah, because we caught up at the London City Sevens just before you flew off to the RPL and that. And those little tournaments like the London City Sevens, we saw an absolute plethora of young talent. And, well, obviously, it's quite apparent now. Obviously, it was the Saris lad.
Glory, Noah.
Noah played in the tournament. It looked quality, and then goes and scores 5 tries on his debut. There must be something that adds together, and it's something that I've asked previously on the podcast as well. That why isn't Sevens being used more as that development model like it used to be, as you said? That we know we've got plenty to get into in this anyway, but it is the perfect in between, like for players that are exceptionally talented, but also need to find a way of being blooded in a little bit on a world stage or even on a sort of a corporate stage. Like, because there was a period of time that they did Prem Sevens as well, weren't there? Because I was speaking to the late, great Warren Abrahams on here. He's been on as a previous guest, and we spoke to him about the Sevens and potentially being branded a Sevens coach as well, which obviously we'll get onto to you as well on that sort of model. But he said about the development model there. Do you agree that's something as rugby we've completely come away from and it's a wasted resource?
I think it's all about language, if I'm honest with you. because you've hit on a lot of points there. And let's talk about the mature nations. Let's just talk about England, Scotland, Wales, right? Ireland.
Yeah.
Well, less so Ireland because it's not really part of their model. But if you take like a Noah Kalori, right, it's a great example. He was exposed at that City Sevens as part of his rugby diet, let's just call it.
Yeah.
Different experiences, different circumstances, but ultimately playing rugby and in a way where he's got to solve problems. But I look at it a little bit more differently, right? So I look at my son Lucas, right, who's at Harlequins, again, same year ahead of Noah and so forth. England 20s, blah blah blah. As a 17-year-old, he's enjoying it. But all of these players, right, they go into the England 20s and so forth. And England profess that look at us developing all of these players, and they are developing them, and they are getting experiences, and they are going to the World Cups and so forth. But what people seem to not realise is that for one term, from the ages of 10 to 18, all of these players are exposed to a different form of the game called sevens, which culminates in Rosalind Park Sevens, which is a full term of rugby development doing something different to achieve the ultimate aim. So when we talk about sevens and the player pathway piece, we have to talk about sevens as it's an investment. It's not the whole answer. It's part of the pathway. It's part of the answer. But the bean counters at the RFU look at, well, we can't afford to spend $2 million on a sevens team to take them around the world because we need to spend it on all of these other things. We have to do England Day, and we've got the women's game to invest in and so forth. So as a consequence, it's deemed that, well, it doesn't give us a return on investment, therefore we're not doing it. When actually it's part of the whole holistic development of a player that you'll get a better version of yourself. So yes, we saw Noah Kalori, great going forward on the high ball, catching kickoffs. But that's only part of the game. Like Noah's got to learn the realms of defending space and dealing with high balls going backwards and so forth. And part of that will be 15s and 7s. And they all have. So I say to the powers that be in these rugby mature nations, stop looking at the bottom line on your sevens and start looking at it as an investment. And the reality is that in England, we're very fortunate, let's just say, in the fact that we've got a very mature academy system and those guys come through. But they come through in a very insular, granular way rather than a holistic, rounded way like they did in the old days, where you're experienced, you understand how to tour, you meet other cultures, as well as you're put under this intense pressure as a rugby player. So I think they're missing a trick. They're dressing up to suit them. I also think when you look in England as an example, right, with our university development, this can be another route back into rugby where you create positive role models at the top of the game. If you don't quite make it in the academy at 18, 19, is your journey over? No. Well, Don Brandt's wasn't. He went to Cardiff Met, Northmore, Cardiff Met, and there are many others that then find their way back into the system. If you hit our university model, we can cradle to grave this from 5-year-olds through the school system into university, ultimately then to create an international sevens side, whether it's Team GB, whether it's the British Lions, or whether it's England, Scotland, Wales, I think is all to be considered probably in a further question that you'll probably ask me. But I think it's madness to allow the international sevens to be killed off in Team GB, what they're doing at the moment, where they've turned it into a part-time team. The only full-time players seem to be Scottish players because Nucifora sees value in it. Funny enough, smart man. And the other nations can't be bothered to invest in it. And I think that's dangerous because I think it can have knock-on effects in the wider game, the community game. And I think there's an opportunity to grow this game in our geography, say in England as well as around the world, so that it will bring new audiences in, because ultimately it appeals to the younger audience, and we have an aging audience at international level 15s and the Premiership. So I think it's a bit of a long-term investment play that we need to look at here, as well as the natural player development pieces that historically has shown. It continues to show with, all of these young under 20 boys that are coming through now, the golden generation that they're talking about. They've all played sevens for at least one term since the age of 10 through to 18. And that's when you have that acceleration of learning. But ultimately, you're not the finished article, Ainsley. Yes, you need to become a better 15s player. Sevens will enable them to do that. So I think there are so many different layers to this that that we're missing. And as you say, you strip it right back to the City Sevens, right? That is a perfect segue for all people that come through the pathways, wherever it is. They've been discarded. They come through the club pathway. They come through the Sevens circuit, the National Sevens plan, like the Lit Sevens circuit. And all of a sudden, there's a forum for them to compete on a level playing field and show their wares. And, I know it was a Quins Saracens final, but the two semi-finals, which were against two kind of, let's just say, quality sevens invitation teams, created opportunity for both sides to experience different things and develop. And everybody went away in a positive way, and corporately, investment money-wise and so forth. These people are exposed both ways. So I just think there's an opportunity there that we're not maximising, and I think that's the point.
Correct. So I'm going to hit you with this one then. R360, obviously they're trying to push forward with a 15s model. Are they doing it the wrong way, and should have they targeted the sevens model to start with and open that corporate model and then loan players into the model that need that development, rather than go and saying we're going to try and steal players from everyone else? Yeah,
but I think the R36 model is about, I mean, again, it's controversial, right? And people can agree, disagree. I think, interestingly, R360 is just trying to solve a financial issue in the 15s game.
Yeah.
And the reality is, hey, it's, for me, the king is dead, long live the king. You take the top 100 players, we didn't know about Marcus Smith when he was 18, 19. We all rave about him now, but there'll be another guy coming through and he'll become a superstar, and that's what you want, one in, one ready. I think that's the challenge for all these Premiership clubs. So if you lose your top players, like if you're a Harlequin supporter, you're a Northampton supporter, you just want your team to win and compete, right? And the stars are the stars. So I think R360 and what they're trying to do is they're just trying to solve a monetary issue. Whether or not I agree with it or not, I mean, the reality is if you can play R360 but you're available for your country, then and it takes a burden away from the clubs and the country, then why wouldn't you consider that? So I think the model there for the 15s is what it is. I think there is an opportunity, and the RPL showed us this, with a way that you can create credible livings for sevens players, whereby the superstars who might not be the superstars in the 15s, you Marcus Moneta isn't a star in the 15s, but a star in the sevens. Perry Baker we would never have heard of if it hadn't been for the sevens. The reality is, I think that if you can create that type of opportunity, be that on a single geography like India did, we could do that in the UK for sure, or whether that's a cross-border one, where it's best of the best on a franchise, as long as it complements the World Series, let's say on the sevens front, we're in business, because the World Series is the key, because that's the key to our Olympics, and that allows us to then build other competitions and tournaments to leverage new audiences and new money and new opportunities into the world. So R360, I think, is a model that is very, very like that you could do on the sevens. But I think the sevens is a unique opportunity because we build around the World Series. I mean, again, whether we think the World Series in its current state is the right way is another point. But I think there's opportunity to create commercial leagues that complement the World Series. Don't compete, because if you compete, then you're causing problems. But I think to complement. And I think that's probably the argument on the R360. They think it will compete with the domestic leagues rather than complement. And I think it depends what way you look at that. The strength of the Premiership, I think, is tribal. So I think that the traditional supporter base will stay true to their roots. And I think the reality is it's just the in and out of the players. But as I said, the king is dead, long live the king. I'm a great believer that, time stands still for nobody in rugby. When you're an old player, you're gone and somebody new's in. And I think it will create depth in our talent pool as well.
I think obviously Ben Young's made it quite clear on the love of rugby when he said if he was offered it at 33, he'd probably explore the option. But when he was 21, he wouldn't be interested at all, because obviously he had goals to set. Because obviously they're everyone's basically said, every nation apart from certain like Fiji have basically turned around and said you're not able to go and play in 360 and play for your national side. So,
but that's the point. That's the point, though, is it not? Like, that's the point. Is like, why are the countries doing that if it doesn't commit? If it doesn't conflict with the international windows? And I think the interesting question for Ben Youngs would have been, if you were 21, 22, 23 and you could play for England and play R360 or Leicester, what would you do? And, back in the day when Ben Youngs probably started, loyalty, and loyalty is a two-way thing,
right,
would have said, I'm a Leicester boy through and through, right? And he might have been, because that's who he's grown up on the terraces watching. But 3 or 4 years in, he's 24, 25, so I've only got, I need to maximise my earnings. And R360 are offering him, I don't know, I'm making the numbers up here, right? They offer him $1 million and Leicester offer him 300 grand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he's going to R360 because he can still play for England. And I think is that a restriction of trade? I don't know. And I think
that's probably the next path that's going to come in.
My Lord.
How many? Well, look, you look at what's happened in football. Like Lassana Diarra, he obviously got stuck in the middle of the major issue when Russian football stopped because of COVID and obviously the war and everything. He wasn't allowed to free transfer in between, and there's a massive lawsuit that's going on in football that's basically going to bring the whole transfer system crashing down.
Yeah,
and they had the Bosman rule in, everything like that. So it's coming, but who's going to put their hand in the pocket to go and speak to the lawyers? That's going to be the other one.
The R360 boys have got money, right? They got deep pockets, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. I think that,
no, I hope not.
I mean, you can argue it both ways. R360, like the unions will say you're going to hit the community game, you're going to hit this, you're going to hit that, and there's a plausible way to look at that. But ultimately, at the top of the game, there's a financial hole that at the moment owners are filling, and the unions are making big money. So it's a difficult one, and I think World Rugby don't want to obviously lose control, because obviously the 15s World Cup is a huge moneymaker, and that does underpin the game at a nations level, and ultimately we want to find a way to create more opportunities for more countries to play, and again we'll probably get into how best to do that, but ultimately that's the aim. But World Rugby will hold very tightly onto anything on the 15 side. So it's very much turkey's vote for Christmas for sure. And R360 have probably got a fair bit to do on their admin and so forth side to ensure that all of their ducks are in a row. So I don't think the story's over. I think fair play, the unions have all kind of circled the wagons, and as have the NRL as well. I mean, that's
I was going to say, I mean, that's a major statement.
Yeah, 10
year ban. Was it 10-year
ban? I mean, that's a restriction of trade as well. But but again, like you said, who's going to pick up the phone to the lawyer and underwrite it? It's messy. Proper messy.
That's rugby, though. It doesn't seem to go too easy, does it? People are very resistant to change, as we know. Like change is not a well-known factor within rugby. Getting on to obviously the world scene as well, as you said, the Women's World Cup we've just had in England was probably potentially one of the biggest spectacles and the turning point for the women's game. Financially, I was looking at some of the figures, and I think we still made a significant loss, or World Rugby lost a significant amount of money on that. Nobody talks about it because obviously it was such a pivotal and important part of the game. How can we get that so wrong for something that had such a big hype, such a big platform, such a big opportunity? The media rights weren't great, to be honest. Like, I think the media rights weren't sold in a way for that to make money. It was more of a tournament to create for the next one, or was it just they don't know how to make money and it was just a lost leader?
I just think it's an evolution. I think people need to remember that the women's game has only really been professional properly, right? And only with a few nations the last 4 or 5 years. So we're kind of back 95 to 99 in the men's game, if we're honest. And, Nelson Mandela and that World Cup in '95. That was a pretty impressive spectacle. And I think, look, we've got to let it develop. Everybody's in a hurry, right? The women will get there a lot quicker
they're doing brilliant.
A lot quicker than the men did in terms of potential. But you've got to let it evolve. I think there's a lot of inspiring that's gone on in this last World Cup. I think in terms of, you got to see it to be it, and you know the pictures in the stadiums of dads with daughters and mums with daughters, and when you listen in the stadiums, the different feel and hear that you have, it's a different audience. So I think the girls have done an amazing job of marketing and inspiring and mobilising the women's game as a credible alternative for as a sporting piece and a place where you can actually actively earn a living. But in terms of, you know, when you look at the hard and fast commercial realities of it all, it's probably not easy to make money commercially at the moment. It's just early days. It's evolution. So don't compare yourself to where the men's game is and the money that's being generated in that. No, not yourself, but anybody. The reality is in understand it's a journey and a process. They will get there a lot quicker, but they just need time. And I think the foundations have been laid. And it's how they embrace and how they kick on and how they invest in that. You know, and to that point, that's probably where what's lacking in the women's game at the moment is depth and more nations that are able to compete, because what you're seeing is for every year that goes by where you've got France and England that are ultimately professional, that's every year that the tier 2 or the developing nations fall back, which is what happened in the men's game. And now, you know, that the gap between the nations is probably irreconcilable on the men's side. And on the women's side, we need to learn the lesson to make sure that doesn't happen. So the likes of Samoa and Fijiana and things like that actually can keep up with the likes of New Zealand, Australia, England, France, and the home nations. So I think that's the lesson that we need to ensure, because what we want is, in the women's game, you want 10, 12 teams that can win the 15s World Cup. We're never going to have that in the men's game ever now. So I think that's the opportunity for the women's game to embrace. I think things like R360 don't necessarily work for the women's game, but we go for equality, right? What we do in the men's, we must do in the women's. But the R360 definitely would hurt the women's game right now, because there isn't the depth of worlders to be able to service the sevens and the 15s as well. Because if you think about the difference between the men's and the women's game, is that the women's game, the players still are able to cross over to do both. Whereas the men's game, they become two different player pools. And who's to say that won't happen in the women's? But it can't happen until you have enough depth across the board to do that. So I think it was an amazing tournament. I think they did a fantastic job, the players, in terms of what they put on. And full stadiums. I mean, I think that in itself tells a story, and I think the money will follow. I just think that they need to be patient and not too greedy, and just, you know, they're going to leave it all in a better place, and that's the reality. And
I think, as you hit the nail on the head when you said alternative, because a lot of people compare the women's game to the men's game. It's a completely different it's a completely different spectacle. They do everything differently, and they do what works for them and for the supporters. There's a whole different level of support. There's a lot of men that won't watch women's rugby because they don't class it as a performance sport. But as we said, it's an alternative way of getting kids into rugby. Like, as you said, the amount of families that go to the game, and that the greed point. I'm not saying about losing money on ticket sales. It was this probably advertised through the media as well as possible, because there wasn't as many platforms available to watch it. But that will come with time, hopefully. So obviously that will change.
That's an education piece as well, right? Because we've still, some nations embrace it, others are still a little bit reluctant. And you've just hit the nail on the head as well. They are two very different sports, but don't forget the women's game is bringing new audiences. That's what's fresh about this.
It's perfect. It's brilliant.
Our sport needs new audiences, because our 15 sport is aging out a little bit on the men's side, and we need to find a way to reinvigorate and rejuvenate and re-engineer and so forth. And, you know, there is a little bit of ignorance around some of the women's game and so forth, but that's takes education, that takes time and patience. And the girls are doing a fantastic job, right? But the games are different, right? There's a lot more space.
Yeah.
You know, I liken it to tennis. Is like the men's game in tennis is power, serve, volley. The women's game is so much more fluent, and there's more rallies, and the ball's alive a lot more. There's, you know, and so forth. And that I think is the beauty of the two forms. They're all rugby, but they're just a different style.
Exactly that. Because obviously I go a lot. I cover a lot of the Spanish women's and stuff as well, and just like watching people like Claudia Pena and
good player,
and just what a player,
good player,
and just such a lovely person as well. When you meet her and you talk to her, and she's just so humble about all of it, but she could find space in the phone box, like, couldn't she? She is different gravy. And then you've got players that are coming through, and I think the women's Prem is now evolving with so many different nationalities coming in, and I think that's the only issue is there's potentially not. It's the same as the men's, to be honest. The championship doesn't really complement the Prem. There's not that. There's not quite enough to create a depth, as you said, a depth of player pool.
There's no depth, is it, right? So if you look at the PWR, the amount of overseas players that come, because they haven't got that in their country as well. So the PWR is along with the French league is flying everybody, and as a consequence, you know, you've got a lot of European and North American and South American players over here, right? You have less so from Oceania and so forth, but they tend to go to Japan, and they have a very small, tight season down there. But, you know, you're seeing Aussies coming across, a couple of Kiwis now coming across as well, signing for Queens. I saw that. So I think the PWR is at the forefront, but there isn't the depth there, right? So again, we want to bring through our domestic players, and as you say, the championship is a struggle because that's purely amateur, and these girls have to work full time. It's very much like the kind of the early 90s, 80s, where, you know, it is, but it's evolution, and it takes time, and you know, it's not straightforward. But I think, you know, with the PWR is creating those tribal pieces in the women's game as well. You know, you look at Gloucester Hartpury, who I know are doing fantastic. You look at Bristol and so forth. We just need to get consistency of competition. We need to get consistency of environments for these girls as they become more and more full-time at these clubs. But that, like anything, right, those programs cost money. So who's paying for this money? How's that money being financed? Is that the clubs that have got to do it? Because if you look at the Premiership clubs, say like the Gloucesters and the Leicesters and things like that, they're under the pump trying to make money with the men's rugby, and now they've got to try and do the same with the women's or invest and so forth. And it's not easy, right? And you then come full circle back to your R360. Does your R360 release a large chunk of your biggest costs, which are labour costs, which will be player salaries, and all of a sudden does it create? But it takes a cooperation and coordination rather than a conflict to get where we need to get to.
Very much like live golf again, and it's all over again. It's the same sort of model, like, and then they'll go to a Christmas party together, and everyone will get pissed up, and they'll all shake hands, and we'll all be safe, and rugby was saved, and this will be a pointless podcast all over again.
Let's hope so, eh?
Yeah. Red Bull have obviously come into Newcastle. Do you think they'll ever dabble across into the women's? Do you think that's a potential game changer?
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
because obviously, so Gallagher have obviously come in and sponsored the women's, the PWR. So there's financial corporate decisions being made at a sponsorship level. Is there a sort of a potential Red Bull franchise purchase?
I mean, it would. I think it
hasn't worked at Newcastle yet, obviously, but
but it'd be interesting at Newcastle. Just when you look at the signings that they've made, right? And I'm not interested about the player signings. I look at the fact they got Gregor Townsend as a consultant. They've got a Scottish former SRU CEO. They've got a Scottish guy that's director of operations driving their general manager, and I'm like, there's a lot of SRU influence here, and Newcastle's just across the way. Does this become the Scottish third team? or the third piece. Right now, again, hey, Red Bull will bring stars in for sure because actually everything they can offer outside the salary cap in terms of performance and so forth. But all of a sudden, if you're SRU, you're like, actually, from the women's side, this is perfect for us. Yeah. And for home Six Nations rugby on the women's side, that's perfect. And for Red Bull, it's the Northeast. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think Red Bull are smart because I think they see a potential opportunity in the game and a gap in the market in picking an area that they've picked. I think whether they can monetize and create, and they might create money in a different way, right? They might. The rugby might be the conduit, not the direct investment money, but they're all buying sporting teams and organisations and franchises and so forth. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and potential there because of where Newcastle is located and the way that they seem to be building their infrastructure. It's interesting, but I wouldn't be surprised, and I hope so because I think that would be great.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It'd be great for the women's, the Gallagher women's, because it would open the door, and it would certainly, if SRU embraced it, make Scotland a far stronger proposition on the women's side because they'd be able to develop a bigger pool. And actually, I know England, the Red Roses might look like a bit of an encroachment, but the reality is competition is good, right? It drives everything forward. So, it's exciting times up in the Toon, I think, for Red Bull.
Do you reckon they're going to encounter the same issue as the PIF in the football? Obviously, they've struggled to actually get players to move to the northeast. Like a lot of players, Jack Knowles, he's a Red Bull sponsored player. Is he going to sacrifice the south of France to potentially go?
I doubt that's a lifestyle choice. I think like anything, dare I say it, money talks. So the reality is, there's some lovely places up in the northeast. Anyway, you know whether you want to be in and around, but you ain't far from Edinburgh and so forth and the borders and so I don't know. I think it's a lot easier from a rugby perspective. It's very different, like I say, you attached in the Premier League to Newcastle when you're down in Monaco and everybody earns a bucket load of money. So it is. I think the reality is that rugby is not as they're not as fortunate enough to be as picky. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I think there'll be some big names that land at the Red Bull.
Who knows? Finn Russell might be going back up there as the third Scottish team.
I know it sounds weird, but it's not.
So we've now got to get on to the World Series. And as we sort of caught up briefly before this, how uninspiring is it at the minute? Obviously, Dubai Sevens is on the horizon at the end of November. A limited fixture list, a limited amount of teams, a pretty lackluster draw. Are we just going through the motions now, or is there actually, do you think there's a bigger plan to this and it's just a case of we've got to scale back to start again?
I don't think there's a plan. That's the problem. I'm very vocal. The people that are running the World Sevens Series, the leadership, the Sam Pinders, the Nigel Cassises, are getting it massively wrong. Let's look at it. The World Sevens is a way for any country in the world to compete legitimately. The 15s is a done deal on the men's. It's one of 3 or 4 nations are winning it. That is it. In the sevens, when we were back in 5-6 years ago, any team from 8 or 9 could win. And that's saying something, right? That's proper legitimate competition. And I include the USA in that. I include Kenya in that. Non-traditional rugby mature nations, they were tearing up trees and causing problems for the traditional nations. To where we are now, which is, as I said, it was a pretty uninspiring 8-team, 2 pools of 4 announcement for Dubai. I mean, it's a shambles. And the reality is that we've got a World Cup 15s, it's expanding to 24 teams because they're trying to, grow the game. Like, you're not growing the game because it's not legitimate. It's only going to be the same 4 teams in the semi-finals, and these other teams they're just making up the numbers. Yet in the form of the game, which is genuinely able to grow it globally, You're reducing it from 16 to 12 to 8, and you're making it harder for these countries that want to invest because the countries that don't want to invest, which are the likes of the home nations, the likes of Australia, the likes of New Zealand, the likes of South Africa, they want to minimize their investment because they want to put it into other parts of their game. But what they're not prepared to do is give up their standing in the sevens. What they do is we'll make it really difficult for everybody else to actually compete. So we'll put our votes together at World Rugby. We'll all amalgamate, and then we'll get it cut down at Exco from 12 to 8. And it's like you're not growing the game. You're killing the game. You're trying to save, but you want to keep your place at the table for the Olympics. And if you don't want to invest properly, then that's fine. Then you take your chances and let the Kenyas, let the Uruguays, let the USA, let the Canadas come through and actually dominate, along with Fiji, who is their national sport, and go past you.
Spain seriously, Spain has started.
I mean, Argentina have got the perfect balance between the two. But when you look at the whole thing, it's like this is votes, this is positioning by mature nations, and then they dress it up. This is the bit that frustrates me. They dress it up by saying, well, we lost 27 million. You lost 27 million or whatever you lost, or whatever number you make up, and it changes from week to week. You lost it because you stopped trying to be a federation and tried to be an events company. You're not an events company. So Dubai make money. Why? Because they're an events company. Hong Kong make money because they run it like an event and they do it. So let the unions or let in the private event people run the events. You don't try and make money at it. Your job is to create a platform to allow these countries to develop, evolve, and globally compete to grow the game globally. You make your money on the 15s World Cup because that is like falling off. That's falling off a log. Do you know what I mean? So you're not equipped, and you don't understand the dynamics of how to make sevens work in the job, because the sevens is an in-event experience. It's not built for television. It's not built for television. No. But all you're trying to do is make it shorter and shorter, tighter and tighter in order to do that. It's not. It's about making money at the event and creating a festival or an experience that hopefully then you can broadcast, because broadcast will be interested to a point, but maybe you've got to do that over free to air, over the top or whatever, so that all the modern audiences that they do now is my sons would set their clocks for the games they wanted to watch, and then you click on YouTube and you watch them, or you whatever, and you monetize and you create incomes in a different way. So I think I worry, because I look at where we are now, and 8 teams, that will kill off other programs around the world. I mean, I've seen it. I've left USA 18 months ago, and look where they are now. Yeah. And they're investing less and less and less because it's becoming harder and harder. You look at Samoa, you look at Uruguay, who have constantly been there or thereabouts, but aren't given the consistency to stay on it. Look at Kenya. They're yo-yoing up and down, when really they should be consistently building and becoming a force in Africa. If you're India, right, where they're trying to invest through the RPL, they're not a cat and hell's chance. And whether they achieve it or not, they need the ability to dream. But you're making it harder for these countries to dream, because you're closing the shop for the traditional rugby nations who don't really want to invest.
Yeah, it's like even Germany. Look at Germany; they were banging on the door in the second tier now, and like that's now effectively been closed.
But Germany qualified, right? So if you think about the last in that debacle in LA, where those top 4 teams that were qualified in the relegation promotion thing, which Germany won one of those 4 spots. They then were told, well, you're not going up because it's an 8-team league. So you've just changed the rules of the game during the year that we're playing the league.
Tournament,
I mean, it's incompetent. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. And you had World Rugby defending what they're doing. And it's like the only people that get penalised, funny enough, are the nations like Germany, Kenya, Uruguay, USA, all of the countries that don't have a say in the big picture. But Australia over the moon, New Zealand, and all the people on the Exco, we're over, all of that lobbying and people don't call it out, but the reality is that's what's wrong with the game, because we're not we're not got the best interest of the game at heart. And don't talk to me about the finances, because that's your incompetence as a federation wanting to be an events company. You know, when you look at Team GB as a consequence of what's happened there, where they've gone to now. Wow. Now, again, this is probably a direct result of the fact that when they were trying to look at doing the legs for this year, London were going to bring a leg back. Like, they were going to do a leg at the World Series. Now that'd have been great for our game in the home miles. You know, in England, specifically when you think about Roslyn Park and the schools and all that. World Rugby made it impossible for the people running it to make money. So as a consequence, we're out. And as a consequence, that meant that Team GB went from being full-time to part-time. Now, whether I agree that should be the only marker that depends whether it goes full-time is a non-point. But World Rugby have added to that, and that's made it easier for the powers that be at England and Wales and Scotland to go, do you know what, we're not doing this full-time anymore. And we end up where we are, which is a group of players that are going to go part-time into this 8-team tournament, and they're going to be against programs that are still full-time, and they're going to get whooped, and then it's going to further deteriorate. Now, let's hope World Rugby reverse this and go to a proper model of 12 to 16 teams and stop trying to be an events company and give it back to the unions.
Tender it out. Offer it out. Just offer it. There's enough companies out there. Like, I've just got the list here. So Dubai, they're already set up to do a sevens model. Cape Town, already experienced in events. There's enough stadiums there for them to do everything there.
Give that back to these SARU to make money, right? But stop trying.
Or give it to one of the clubs. One of the clubs. Let the clubs tender for it. So we're going to do it in Joburg. We're going to do it here. The club, like Sharks or any like that. There's enough people. There's enough companies and experience that know how to make these events happen, rather than adding to the wage bill at World Rugby. Singapore, another one. Australia, they've had 1 or 2 events in their lifetime. Vancouver, they've done a few. USA, they know how to run an event. Hong Kong, potentially biggest sevens tournament in the world. Valladolid, they're already gathering pace in Spanish. It's become the Spain's home ground, effectively, for rugby, right? Bordeaux, another well-renowned rugby. Why can't these be outsourced to the clubs? Why can't this be tendered? Why can't the clubs or communities have the opportunity to win these bids? Same as like a World Cup, or like when they bid for the Champions Cup. Let them say, right, we want to host this. This is what we can do. Yeah. You win it. This is it. You can bring in as many teams as you want. We'll do this. We'll even sign it for 2 years or whatever. Or we spread the word of rugby.
You need to sign it for multiple years so the people can make money. I think the reality is obviously you've got World Rugby who are trying to make money, right? With categories on corporate, but obviously you need a consistency of execution, right? So there's a minimum standards in order that you've got to deliver as part of the contract, and that's all that needs to be happening. But in terms of the ability to sell certain categories to sponsors and so forth, there's all these hindering things. Well, this one's we need that one, we need this one. So hold on, mate. You're a federation. Your job is to minimum standards to develop to deliver the World Series. In terms of how the event is monetized and made, then that's a different point. And I think that whole model needs to change. And World Rugby need to change their mindset and their mantra. They've gone down this route, but they've gone around it half-cocked and they're not equipped to do it. I think, when some of those venues you talked about, that they're not necessarily equipped, but and ultimately, is it a union that undertakes? Let's take Cape Town as an example, right? Saru undertake we're going to have a sevens event and we're going to move it wherever we're going to move it, but allows us to monetize, and we have these costs and these incomes. But ultimately, that's what happens in Dubai. That's what happens in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong do a bloody good job about it. Dubai do a very good job. They've got longevity, they've got consistency, but they also know what they're doing. And I think the World Series needs to be a series of individual events, which is what it used to be. under the umbrella of this is how we do our World Championship, because it's a pinnacle experience for those that attend. And then that allows, IOC money and so forth to then be distributed to allow those nations to become self-sufficient, to build their own programs. But likewise, you want to get to the Olympics, it's very, very clear. You go through 3 to 2 to 1. But the reality is it's not a closed shop at 1. It's a 16. So there's a real credible route that you can make. Now, all of these PowerPoints they deliver at the moment as well, you can get from 3 to 1 in 1 year. It's like you can on that bit of paper, but you are nuts if you think that's possible, because you've made it so difficult on your bit of paper to be able to compete that the closed shop of this 8 up here, which funny enough, 6 of them are the main stakeholders on World Rugby, mean that even this mob in Sevens 2 are a huge disadvantage. So it's an absolute mockery, and the people that are responsible, those Sevens leadership, it's disappointing. I'd love to see an external group, I'd love to see an R360 come and say, do you know what? We'll run the World Series and we'll create it. Yeah. And the problem is, World Rugby will never do that, because in case they make it a success, it looks like they've given away a golden egg. But rather than going, well, we've just saved you the 20 odd million you keep saying you're losing, and you can now spend that on the women's game and so forth, or other parts, the age group, then great. But no, you're going to do this fourth dawn of this 2014 15s World Cup, which doesn't really, you've expanded the under 20s, and that's credible. But let's forget, these the under 20s from the ages of 10 and 18 do a term of sevens as well. And you're excluding all of this group that seem to be discarded at 18, that go through our college models that may come back in. So I think they're doing a terrible job, and they are in danger of killing the world of sevens, because if it continues on the trajectory it is, it will die. And if it dies, then it won't come back, I doubt. What will that then do to the grassroots thing, say in the UK? Like, what will happen to our club sevens program? What will happen to the Roslyn Park sevens? Because these boys have got no role models to go at, right? Like, I think about my Lucas, right? When he was growing up on the 15s, he was looking at, Danny Care and all that, and wanted to be that when he was at Trinity. But as soon as you got to sevens park, you want to be Falau Nua. And he wouldn't know who Falau Nua was unless he'd seen him on the world circuit. And that's the problem. And every young kid aspires to do that. But that seems to be being lost, because again, they just look at dollars. They look at the pound signs.
I think that jumps back to the question as I posed it at the start. I think R360 or a corporate model's got a prime opportunity probably to easier to break into the sevens to prove the proof of concept. I get why they're focusing on the 15s, the 100 best players. It's an easy sell. We've seen the passion and the acceptance of sevens and how it develops players. You can create as many superstars out of the sevens model, and it's easier to move around, and people are willing to go for a weekend rather than potentially one game. Like if you sort of talk to your mates and said, "Oh, well, I'm just going to fly out to the middle of Afghanistan to watch an R360 game, like one random game," they'll be like, "Why? Like Bath are playing Bristol." Like it's easier for people to buy into the sevens model in my mind.
No, I agree with you.
Potentially the 15s.
I 100% agree with you. I think the Sevens World Series is right for somebody with the vision. But again, it only works if World Rugby recognise their weaknesses and put the right people. Because say, for example, R360 came in, they'd still need to be that conduit with World Rugby. It's not about excluding World Rugby, because World Rugby is the World Federation of the game. No. And they need to govern minimum standards and so forth. But let whoever R360, let them run the events. And they can, they understand how to monetize events, right? And you've just hit the nail on the head, right? You go to, you go to that R360 weekend, if it is, it would be like 6 games over 3 days. It's like, okay, well, I'm kind of all 6 games. Whereas in the sevens, you can come in and out. And, you can have your favorite, you got tribal with your nation, but you've always got your second team. that you love. You know, normally it's Kenya, and so forth.
Because the atmosphere.
But you've got the atmosphere, you've got everything that's going on and in and around in that event. So I am 100% in agreement with you. It would make logical sense that somebody start with the sevens, but I can see why R360 have battered their route. But I think there's a gap for somebody to do it, but it only works if World Rugby realise and recognise they are not an events company. You are a federation. Stop trying to be an events company. You know, you've got Dubai and Hong Kong as the bookends already. Boom. Yeah. And they are well-respected, renowned, traditional events. Now build it in between, F1 model, whatever you want to call, I don't know, you know, however you want to kind of dress it up. And then, but then make sure it's for the rugby community, not the 6 or 7 countries, because that doesn't create global representation. That doesn't create true global competition, which the sevens can do, which then aligns with the Olympic spirit. At the moment, we're so fortunate we're in the Olympics, but we're only in the Olympics until 32. And then we got, now if they continue on the tree, they're going to blow that. And I know it's like,
100%.
you know, but we're in LA, and again, the Americans only back winners, right? And if their countries are nowhere near it, then that'll drop. And then it's Brisbane after that, isn't it? It's so, you know, I think rugby is in a very precarious next couple of years, especially rugby sevens.
We now can touch on to, like we've mentioned it a couple of times, the 15s World Cup. I was at the Portugal-Ireland A game in the summer where Ireland won 106-7. There's a lot of concern from a lot of people that that's going to be similar sort of score lines at the World Cup. There's clubs that will stand out a little bit, but it was even more apparent when the likes of Georgia, who are currently trying to stake their claim as a tier 1.5 nation or whatever they whatever they should be, got battered as well by Ireland A. But quite convincingly, a 48-5 or something else, whatever it was. I love tier 2 nation stuff. Obviously, I'm part of it here. There will be nations that stand out, but it's just the 24 clubs is a great idea if the rest of it is able to be invested in. And progressed.
I agree. 24 countries means there's gonna be some absolute car crashes, because the reality is the differential now between the top and the next group is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, you know. And you know, if you think about when we go back to the World Cups in 91, 95, right, where and EV at 87 when Japan were coming through, you know, and New Zealand was spanking them by 100 points. Okay, that's 91, right? No, that's 24 years it's taken. So again, you could argue we're doing this for the next 25 years. Okay, fine. But I think the difference between then and now is that everybody was embracing the start of professionalism, but were predominantly amateur. So the level playing field around the physical development piece was relatively even. Now, that 25 years, I think, is 50 years. Or I just think it's unobtainable, is my point. I think you're comparing two different times that are not comparable. And I just think I think sadly, the 15s is a sport played globally by a few nations at the top. That's it. Yeah. And I think that's the reality of this. And I don't think that will change now. I think it's, you know, it is what it is, right? American football's just played in America. It's still hugely successful, but it's about now, how do you globally make that appealing to the rest of the world who can't play it? And I think that's the challenge on the 15 side. I think those nations that want to, great, but I think it's a little bit of false hope that you have a 24-team Rugby World Cup where, you know, you're going to get spanked. I mean, like, you remember that Pacific Nations Cup they just, right, where USA have just qualified, and I think it was Samoa that did. it was harder not to qualify than qualify. Like, I think they lost all the games, and they won the last game against Samoa, who was outside the Reg 9, so they couldn't use their proper players, and they scraped the win, and they're in the World Cup, and it's like it's nuts. I just think it's false hope. It's a false dawn. And it's a little bit misleading to the punters that when you get to World Cup, right, and again, because they're probably going to charge you £150 a ticket to go and watch the bloodbath, and that's not great either. So I don't see it myself. It doesn't wash, and it worries me a little bit, really, because I think it could be negative for the game rather than a positive.
The whole qualification process has been extremely unnecessarily complicated. Like Rugby Europe Championships, we had 5 clubs, so 4 nations basically qualified already after the second game because it was already structured for Spain, Georgia, Portugal and Romania to qualify. Romania were then absolutely dog shit for the rest of the tournament until the last game against Portugal. Portugal blew up after the semi-final against Spain. They fell apart. Georgia obviously were doing what Georgia do. Spain were obviously the one that was probably taking it seriously. We then saw Belgium put in the best performance of the tournament against Holland and Netherlands to get their qualification spot for the repechage. We then had a Pacific Nations Cup where Japan, Fiji had already qualified, playing against clubs that had to try and, or nations that had to try and get 3rd and 4th spot. 5th and 6th were able to play each other to qualify, and then Samoa still qualified already to get through to the repechage. So, and then the only one that didn't, and then we've got 5 clubs out of the Rugby Europe Championships. We've got 8, 9, whatever, however many's run out of the Pacific nations. Then you go down to South America, which had the top 2 had to qualify out of their group. Then the third, 4th, 5th, and 6th had to play a qualifier against each other. Then they got to a final. They they got through. Uruguay got through, and then Paraguay have just had to play Brazil. Paraguay then fielded an ineligible player, so they've fucked themselves out of the repechage. So Brazil are back in, and then we've got obviously the African nations. They played off, and what is it? Nambia are in there as well. And I love being able to watch that amount of rugby, but Christ, why are we doing it so half-assed? Why can't we just create one model? And they like the sevens. Like, is there an opportunity for the 15s qualification model to be like a nations league where all of these clubs get to play against each other and actually have a merit-based system? Like we've got.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with that is they come back to money, right? Because who's financing it, right? Because the unions can't afford it. World Rugby aren't going to do it. And like you've just said, they just created these geographical competitions because it creates interest, keeps costs down.
But surely playing the Nations Cup in America wasn't any cheaper for anyone else. Like the likes of Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, it was all played in America.
I mean, like with all of those things, but what, like you've just said, though, most of them are meaningless games because 5 out of the 6 are qualified. So, but we're getting valuable game time and so forth. Well, okay. I mean, the reality is like you said, you might as well do it on a point system, on a tiering system, so you can pick your fixtures, and then ultimately you have a repechage for the last spots. And that the repechage could be for the last 4 spots. I don't know. To me, it was a mess, but it's a mess because they've gone to 24 teams and 24 teams.
Find a way of.
Well, it's just a waste of time. But ultimately, it allows them to create more meaningless games, which they think they can monetize at the same cost that they're going to be able to monetize the big games. I would hazard a guess that's it. And then, it'll be dressed up as, it's opportunity for all and things like that. It's like, well, but international sport is about proper competition, and that's anything but proper competition. And then you, like you said, you look over the fence, you look at the sevens where you did have proper competition, and all you've done is suppress that. And if you're Kenya, you legitimately could be an Olympic gold medalist, and you could be at the top of the World Sevens game. You're never ever going to be winning the 15s World Cup. And I'm happy to, and I love Kenya and I love a lot of people. I'm happy to declare that they will never win the 15s World Cup, purely and simply because they haven't got the history in the game, and the gap is too big. But have they got the sevens athletes and the rugby athletes to have a proper crack at winning an Olympic gold and winning the World Series? Absolutely, they can. What do they need? They need continuity. They need consistency. And they need an opportunity not to be continually yo-yoed up and down because other nations don't want them to succeed. And they'll, you speak to the World Rugby League, well, it's not like that. It's not like that. Well, it is like that. I've coached Kenya. I've seen it from the other side. I know how you approach the developing nations, and you do the old create that you're giving them opportunities, anything but. If you were and you had the true meaning of the game at the heart of what you were trying to do, you would ensure that we created a vehicle for these teams to excel and drive forward and stick to what you know best, which is federation, being a federation of the game. The governance of the game is tough, right? The world, being governance of
you don't need to add to it.
Well, you're good at that. Like when all said and done, the governance of World Rugby is good. That's your meat and drink. That's what you do. So stick to that. Yeah. Don't try and be an events company because you're allowing agenda, political manoeuvring to come in and all of that bullshit. And that's the biggest problem with these people. All these people get in these positions and they're more interested in their fucking freebies. I'm sorry, but it's the reality. It's true. And,
it is true.
That's not what it's about. It's about developing rugby countries to compete in the forum that they're able to compete in. And sevens is that perfect forum, men's and women, 100%.
Obviously, we want the tier 2s and tier 3s to dine at the top table over a period of time. Without diluting the World Cup, how do you think a separate tournament to be able to get them to like a Nations League where they could play against, like it's worked in football. There was obviously the Nations League. Anyone can go up, down, qualify, a similar model to what the sevens is. Do you think, rather than some of the autumn internationals that are just corporate bullshit, that some of the other summer internationals, that obviously the tours are brilliant, but like, why can't we make some of these a little bit more worthwhile and get clubs to play, like nations to play against nations that they normally wouldn't, but there's actually something to it? Do you think, I know there's a commercial element that's going to stop 100%, that. 100%.
If you're taking the commercial piece out of it, absolutely. Do the All Blacks go to the Fijian Islands and play Fiji because what does that do for the community? I get that. Sadly, a lot of these countries have got private equity investment against them as well. So, ignore the commercial element. Well, that's the problem. They can't. The top nations can't. The likes of South Africa, Australia, England, New Zealand, they can't. France can't, So the reality is interesting enough, I think what you just touched upon is, do you need to have a separate World Cup, right? Like in the World 20s, you have you have the under 20s World Cup and you have the under 20s World Trophy. And if you get promoted and relegation from that do you have that, right? So that the top, I don't know, I'll make this up, right? Say it's a 16-team World Cup.
Yeah, top 16 or something
to
like
the top 12, to the top 8 that make the knockouts from the one before, they automatically are in that. Then the other 8 who don't make that, then the reality is you're on a point system, and they should still make it, but you're giving the other group in the 12 below the opportunity to have a crack at that. And maybe the year before, that other 8 have to play in an autumn series where it is it's a straight knockout, or you progress in the top 4 and it's a seeded, and you play out for your placing. Maybe I think that's credible because it allows teams to develop and organise. Because the big thing is like, let's just say, I don't know, Portugal. It might be a bad example. Paraguay, right? Let's say, I know they're not going, but or Brazil, right? Brazil are going to get spanked. They play the All Blacks and they get spanked 120-0, right? What do they get out of that game?
Yeah.
They get the opposition shirt. That's what they get out of the game, right? And they got an experience. But that's not a positive experience. That's a negative experience. When all said and done, you haven't become a better rugby player. You've just taken a hiding. So you ain't moving forward. So the thing about stretching yourself as a rugby player is you need to be able to play above yourself. But if it's too far above yourself, it's a negative experience. It's got to be kind of step-by-step process. What they're doing here is just ridiculous. So I think something like that has legs and potential. Like anything, they'd have to cost it out and the money and the so forth. But I think that would be sensible.
That's that middle ground, isn't it? Because like we're now in the autumn, November internationals are upon us as well, and Spain are playing England A and Ireland A and then Fiji, which based on the 3rd of December, which is the World Cup draw, means that they can't drop any lower than their ranking points. And they've basically secured their ranking points. So a lot of nations are now using November internationals as a securing point for where they're going to be in the World Cup draw, rather than their match. It's a nothing burger again. And it's great to see England A come to Spain, and it's probably a big spectacle and stuff like that. Ireland A coming to town, but they're not it's a completely different side that was coming in the summer to Portugal. There's a completely different side that went to Georgia. It was basically an Ireland squad that wasn't picked for the Lions. So it was a completely different teams coming to Spain, but there's no world ranking points on it.
Yeah, do you know what my point on that would be, though? Just listening to what you're saying is, right? So I'm like looking at that, you're going, well, this will depend on where they come in the draw. Like, take in the spirit intended. It doesn't matter where they are in the draw. Like, so I would sack off all ranking points. Like, the reality is like that you only need to rank the top 8, right? Because that's where they're all trying to avoid one another. If you're below that, you're all in a hat and you're coming out. And that's how I do it, because the reality is then it's irrelevant. Because if you're Spain, here's my point, right? I think that it's far better development for them to play in England A or to play in Ireland A, because it would be better they play them than, and this is no disrespect to Georgia, because they probably play Georgia a lot, rather than playing Georgia, because they know, well, that's different. To give their players a different stimulus.
Easy. Yeah.
Okay, we'll play this like the Premiership. It's not the England team, but when I talked about that kind of step up approach, that's perfect. But I think those types of, because that's great for the England A boys, who in theory could be a lot of youngsters or people just on the edge got something to prove, is that they're able to put a foot forward as well. So I think I've got a lot of time for that. And I've got a lot of time because that benefits the mature rugby nations as well as the developing nations. And it does allow the developing nations to market it and create something different, right? Because down in Spain, I take this in the spirit and if they always play Georgia, then it's like, oh, okay. But if you've got England A and you've got, I don't know, Glory coming down, right? They've seen him on the Premiership. Blah, blah, I mean, he's 19 years, whether he comes or not, but or Marcus Smith has been dropped down because he's not in it. I don't know. Then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, okay, it's different. And I think those types of challenges are great because it has the ranking points is a non-point, right? Let's not get caught up on that bullshit because it's only ever going to be that top 4 anyway. So now it's about developing the game and creating opportunities and awareness and buzz in the likes of Spain and Georgia and so forth. And so, I think, again, come back to your point, we're making things more complicated than they need to be, rather than actually what's the aim and what's the aim of this? So Spain have done what with their ranking points? Let's just say so the ranking points mean that they'll be protected at what number?
I think they're 14th or 15th in the and that means they get a certain point. Again, it's made it far too complicated. What does that mean? Play the games on the merit. What does that mean on the draw, though? Right, come the World Cup, right? So are they going to avoid any of the top 8? No. So it's a non-point. No, they've still got to play them.
So you're still going to get. In the spirit, you're still going to have 2 games that you're under the pump. Seriously, it's either going to be New Zealand or South Africa. I mean,
Yeah. It's again, I like what they've done bringing those two, because they are a perfect step. But it was more of a, I know they won't admit it, but it was a case of protecting that spot like that. And then there's other nations that are having to do the same. And you think, the World Cup's a World Cup. Like, that's 2 years away. Like, I prefer to potentially drop a ranking place, but play a team that's going to actually test me to make me know where I am in 2 years' time.
So run that by though, right? Do you not think England, they will test them as well as... So if they played...
Oh, they 100%
yeah, but
will.
that's my point is like... do you know what might be the influence on the ranking points? And again, I know we're going to come back to the same thing. I wonder whether you get more funding if you're 14th over 15th. I don't know.
Yeah,
and it's
maybe.
But if it is, it's like, well, you're causing this problem, because it's not like, well, rugby, like, just make it block, because whether you, again, I'm not being derogatory, but whether you're 16th or 20th, I would hazard a guess on any given Sunday, 20th could beat 16th and 16th could beat 20. Makes no odds, right? And probably say the differential is $5, $4, $3, $2. You're like, well, just give everybody $3. And
just average it out.
Because the reality is we need you to get playing experiences to allow you to jump the next band or compete for the next band. And it's like, where's the common sense in all of this?
Commercially, that's the problem. We keep going back to the money, don't we?
Well, money will try. I mean, sadly, that's the nature of the world we live in, right? And that's money makes the world go round, believe it or not. I mean, that's the other problem. But hey, you can still make better rugby decisions. And you know, the thing about the federation, about World Rugby, is that they're not there to make a profit. They're there to reinvest it. I mean, you know, if you're private equity in NZR, in New Zealand Rugby, you all make dough. So I kind of get that the agendas are different, but World Rugby don't have an agenda in theory. That's, you know, come back to my point. Don't be an events company. That's a for profit. You know, don't be what you're not good at.
I think on that note, Mike, I think it's probably a perfect time to end, mate, really. We could be going for hours here, but I think we've pretty much set the world to rights, set fire to it, left the hand grenade with a pin out. We're it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, mate, and hopefully I'll be able to catch up with you over the summer in the Sevens circuit. I think I might be back at London City Sevens, so if you're over there, I'm sure we can grab a beer together. So anyone that wants to obviously follow what you're doing, what are you doing next? Where's the next plan?
I mean, to be fair, I'm kind of still trying to work all that out. If I'm honest with you, I want to be involved in high performance. I'm doing a bit of corporateship as well and mentoring young leaders, but I want to be in rugby as well, and high performance. Don't necessarily need to be the man, can be the man behind the man. That's kind of my passion, is assisting young men, young women to holistically develop to become the best version of themselves on a rugby pitch and off it. That's what I've done for the last 25, 30 years. You know, that I want to get a pint and a half out of a pint on everybody and contribute and be a part of something. So, yeah, we'll see. Bits and pieces going on at the moment. Obviously, would love to right the wrongs of this World Sevens circuit. So, any rich R360 kind of funds that want to get their teeth into something, absolutely, let's get it on.
Yeah, be epic.
No worries.
Mike, really appreciate your time, mate. For everyone that's joined, really appreciate you joining us, and hopefully you enjoyed Mike and our rant about World Rugby Sevens, everything that's potentially wrong and how we could hopefully fix it. Make sure you join us on our next episode, still to be confirmed, our guest, but all our back issues, everything like that's already on YouTube. This will be coming out already on Instagram, everything like that. So I really appreciate everyone that's joined and hope you enjoy it, and see you on the next one.